There's something inherently exciting about the exchange of bullets on screen, the noise, the pyrotechnics, the tension that comes with the possibility of a favourite character's head being blown off. It's adrenaline pumping action at its best. Where a martial arts fistfight or a running chase of course can have you on the edge of your seat, the unique challenges that come with a gunfight and the elements within them stand out for me. Gunfights aren't better. I'd love to do this sort of video with close quarters combat and chase sequences, and I probably will, but for now, let's focus on what makes a gunfight work. Two things for me are key above all else for a strong, exciting gunfight: geography and editing. We need to know where people are, or if not, it must have a narrative reason, and we must be able to follow the action. How the scene is covered on set, and how it is put together in post, makes all the difference. Of course, the visuals themselves, the sound design, the movement of the actors all come together to create a great gunfight, but without a strong sense of geography and editing that helps us follow it, we would be lost amidst the chaos. Chaos is a good word to use there. Often we have numerous guys, sometimes on each side, sometimes many against one or two, all firing in different directions from different locations. It's up to the director to work out how to make sense of it all, and then with the editor to put it together in a coherent form that the viewer can follow. You may have a fight with one gunman against just one other, shooting from cover, but rarely would this be dynamic enough to be considered entertaining. Not that it can't be. In most gunfights, you have guys moving from cover to cover, bullets whizzing by, shots hitting the environment and people. How do we make this easy to follow? Well, one thing of course is shot choice. The use of wides, over-the-shoulder shots, perspective shots, and when you choose to use them in the sequence, is what helps establish geography. The use of wide shots gives us a sense of what the location looks like, and the placement of our heroes within it. Cutting back to a wide after being in close, or having a change in the positions of the players also allows us to reset our understanding. Then using shots such as an over-the-shoulder, or one that follows the aim of the weapon, helps us to understand where our actors are in relation to one another, and the distances and obstacles between them. Simply filming them shooting off camera with no relation to where they are firing is fine, as long as it is edited to show that they can of course see one another. But letting your audience know how it feels for the character by showing something approaching what they can see immerses them in the action. Making sure the audience understands the geography is paramount, and the use of shots that establish where they are and what they are doing, and where they are aiming and who is aiming at them, will ensure that we don't ever have to work out what's going on, and instead can sit back and enjoy the drama. Another thing that is incredibly important for this is adherence to the 180-degree line. This is an invisible line on the set between two or more actors who are supposed to be facing each other. It essentially divides your set in half, giving you 180 degrees within which to shoot, that is set by where your actors are. If someone is firing left to right, then those that they are shooting against must be firing right to left. This way they are looking at one another. If we were to see them shooting the same way, they could be shooting at the same thing, and it's confusing. Have a look at this classic scene from The Untouchables. It's interesting as we have two heroes, one moving outside of the main space, and one stuck originally in this one area shooting at different targets, and the baby moving down the stairs. It's a huge dynamic space over several levels, with guys all over, and yet is very easy to follow. The use of slow motion helps, something John Woo also uses a lot to make things easier to follow, but also the use of the 180-degree line. Everyone shoots down the same plane throughout. We know where people are based on where they point. Costner always shoots left to right, and the bad guys right to left. When Costner switches side, we see it again from a wider angle, after which the directions we see them shoot has changed. When Andy Garcia is introduced, we have a dynamic zoom, mixing a wide and close to show his location. This scene is full of movement and different elements, and yet thanks to several on-set techniques and the editing, we always cut with each gunshot to know where it lands. You are completely immersed in what is happening. Now compare this to what should be an incredibly simple scene in The Art of War, which faces Michael Biehn and Wesley Snipes off against each other in one corridor. Following this should be easy, and it even uses slow motion, which should make it even easier. And yet, it is a mess. It cuts way too quickly, it's poorly lit. The guys are too close to the camera for us to really be able to tell who is who at times, which coupled with the messy direction, leaves the whole scene jarring and ineffective. Of course, it isn't just about the actual gunfight itself, but how we get into it. Dropping us cold into a gunfight can be very exciting, but generally gunfights are not overly long, and so we want to build into them, treat them as a climax, albeit one that itself has moments of tension and relief. The aforementioned scene from the Untouchables spends about 5 minutes building and building until we get to it, to that release. And this is something we see often. One of the greatest gunfights ever committed to screen in Heat used a variety of techniques to build an incredible sense of tension, until Val Kilmer's gun explodes and we begin the terrifying on-foot gun battle. Throughout the preceding scene, we have quiet but constant foreboding music, coupled with very generously timed editing that intercuts between the cops and robbers at increasing pace, developing carefully until they are closer and closer and it erupts. The music is gone, giving way to dramatic, booming gunshots, and the slower pace editing becomes faster and more intense. The coverage is still easy to follow, but the frequency of the edits feels more in line with the narrative. And that is what is often forgotten when talking about action, is how the story affects us when watching it. Every gunfight should be seen within the greater context of the narrative. Our relationships with those involved matter, and the tone of the production as a whole informs the stylistic choices. If we have spent a long time with a character learning about their talents, about how skilled they are with a gun, it makes sense for us to follow them, to see how they operate. It's a reward for spending time with them. In John Wick or Boardwalk Empire, we have heard of just how good these characters are, and so it is okay for us to focus more on them, and that we don't establish so much the position of the bad guys. In a film like Hitman Agent 47, where bad guys come out of nowhere in the opening scene, it's a little harder to believe. We are dropped in cold and don't know anything about the location. These are just faceless enemies appearing from nowhere within a place we have no understanding of. Is this guy supernatural in his ability? This is just poorly done. If you're going to focus mainly on the lead and use it as a display of their ability as opposed to a straight fight, we need to both want to actually see that and believe first that it is something that could happen. Often, though again not always, you need the context for what the gunfight is happening in, especially if it's less of a fight and more a one-man army type shoot-fest. A film like Open Range, which tries to be a realistic look at life in the Old West, is a good example of how the pace of editing and shot choices reflect the narrative. The generous pace doesn't mean it's any less chaotic in terms of what happens within the frame, but the creative team want it to feel dangerous, and let us feel how it would feel to be there. It juggles a sense of immediacy with sprawling scale. From the stunning opening, this feels more in line with the grit of Way of the Gun. Here, injuries matter. One gunshot turning the tide, and within its grander narrative is filled with fantastic smaller moments that turn this into an absolute shootout classic. Way of the Gun's final fight is worth a mention too. Clearly going for a more realistic portrayal of a gunfight, we feel that a barrage of bullets could come from any window or corner, and gaining ground feels like a challenge. It's difficult for the heroes and for the antagonists. The scene is covered well, we always know where our heroes are, and yet it still feels surprising and chaotic. It's not glamorous, but it is supremely well directed. The best gunfights stand out both technically and artistically, representing the tone of the film, giving the characters a dangerous fight, and showcasing the talents of the director. From the classic staccato editing of Sam Peckinpah's influential gun battles, to the balletic beauty of John Woo's legendary fights, to more recent exciting exchanges of bullets in films like The Raid and Django Unchained, the gunfight will always be a staple of action cinema. They can feel cool, fun, electrifying, exciting, intense, terrifying, or even be played for laughs. It's something inherently cinematic, something most of us will only really experience watching a screen. A good gunfight grips you, making you will the heroes to success, whilst appreciating the rhythm of it, of the feeling of the fight itself. They're hard to get right, but when they do, there's nothing quite as cinematic as a big, bold shootout filled with bullets and blood.